Welcome to the Economic Development and Energy Committee meeting. Everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Legislator Birmingham.
Here.
Legislator Elner. Chairman Gouldman.
Present. Legislator Elmer will be here in a few minutes. He got a little delayed. Okay, item number 3. We have an update from Putnam County Economic Development Corporation. Kathleen Abels, the president. Want to come up?
Hi, Kathleen. Hi. Good evening, everybody. So there's a lot going on. Some of it's good news, some of it's a little bit alarming, but we persevere one foot in front of the other, right? Village of Brewster, we all know that the developer, Joe Cotter, died suddenly last October. Presently, the village, Harold Lepler, Tom LaPerch are all trying to get another large national scale developer to come in and take over the project. So fingers crossed, and it was a long road. I do these reports actually quarterly. I don't know if you would like me to send them to you, because it kind of gives you a bird's eye of what's going on in the county. I just actually call every planning board for the villages and the towns and say what's going on. And we kind of accumulate that information, and I find it to be helpful. So, sticking with death, the developer from the Glenada Distillery project that's been going on since like around 2014, that gentleman who was residing in Romania, he died suddenly at the age of 59 about a month ago. It was another shocker, so he did have a succession plan, which is one of his sons is supposed to step up and take over. Fingers crossed again. And then the Braemar Assisted Living, also on Seminary Hill Road, the original Guide Post property, which belongs to Hinckley Holdings, which is Harold Lepler, that was subdivided into 3 parcels several years ago. The distillery bought one, they finally bought a second parcel, and the third was supposed to be the Braemar Assisted Living. They cannot get their financing, so that project is off the table for now. Let's see, Gateway Summit and the Fairways, that's pretty much under construction. That's residential, just north of Putt Plaza on Route 6.
Is there any, that's a single unit residential development? Or is it condos?
It is, let's see,
Is there any?
150 units, each with active senior lifestyle communities, situated along the Route 6 east of Putt Plaza. Each project will provide new residences ranging in size from 1,400 to 2,600 square feet with pedestrian trailways. Apparently there's a lake up there. I grew up in Carmel, who knew? But that'll be up there as well. I think some of them are age restricted, age 55 and over, and the others are not. So
Usually.
pardon?
There's usually a percent, sorry Nancy, usually a percentage.
Yeah, and usually a town would impose another, not restriction, but say you need to, we'll help you get these approvals, but you need to set aside 10% for affordable. Do you know if any of that happens?
I don't know if it did happen, but I do know when I go by, they're under construction. And if I could get my blinker on fast enough, I'm just dying to go up there and snoop
Yeah.
around.
I've been up there, it's a lot of dirt is flying, yeah.
Yeah.
It's come along.
They're supposed to be very upscale.
Yeah.
And it's nice because they've got like Centennial Golf Course.
The
Nothing
views-
affordable though.
The views
Don't
are
know.
amazing.
I wonder why the town doesn't impose that. Like it's just a simple, 10% of it has to be affordable. That's
Well, it was approved quite a few years ago,
Yeah.
so. And I think it's, Toll Brothers have taken over. They're a national company, and they do very nice work. 119 Seminary Hill Road, this is residential, but there's a project to develop 50 multi-family dwelling units on 23 acres, and that'll be 33 townhouses and 17 cottages. So, Cold Spring, VR Trail, still the controversial thing. I was in Cold Spring today, so they still have their signs up.
They're equal now, I see.
Are
There's
they?
Some for, some against.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Town of Kent, there's Kent Manor on Nichols Road was a proposed 150 townhouse project. That's gone quiet. Paul Camarda's Patterson Crossing, they've had all their approvals for years. Part of it's in Patterson, part of it's in Kent. And they actually got the approvals to sell gasoline for, to be a Costco, but the project has another extension, but nothing's going on with it right now. An interesting project or parcel to watch, I feel, is 54 Bowen Road. It has a tiny bit of frontage on 52. They just got, I guess, an easement from the town of Kent, not just, but within the last year, to go behind the recycling center on 52, kind of across from the elementary school. And then they had a tiny piece of land that has access to Longfellow Drive in Lake Carmel, but it's like, it's right by I-84. So they're marketing it as an industrial development opportunity with an eye towards commercial development consistent with commercial overlay zoning. Nelsonville, nothing to report at this time. In Patterson, a project I have my eye on is a 120-room, 4-story Adirondack style, a boutique hotel with hiking trails, a grotto, a conference center, wedding venue. I met recently with Supervisor Williams and Pete and Chris Monteleone, who I know because Chris and I had served together on the board of Friends of Laston Park for years. They're super nice people, they're very generous, they're a really good builder. I think they're waiting on outside agencies like DEC. The artist rendering are just, they're stunning. It's like, oh, I want to go there for a weekend. I know I'll have difficulty driving on I-84. It's like, what's going on over there? But they're really, it's so nice. It looks like some of the places I've stayed out west at national parks. It's just that nice. It's not vanilla.
311? Through
It
Fair
is
Street.
311 and Fair Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I've heard there's issues with the water table. When I met with the Monteleones and Supervisor Williams, those didn't come up. I know the county's keeping a close eye on it because those water table issues would affect the county's property on Fair Street, so. And the developers seem like fine, like, oh yeah, these things take time. I mean, they're very experienced people and they're very reasonable people as well. Fox Run off of Bullet Hole Road, which has been around since like the 1960s, they actually have a phase 2, which is proposing to add 80 additional condos there. So they had received conditional approval, and I guess they're working on proving that there's an adequate water supply as well. The rest is just like warehouses. There's a warehouse proposed, 100,000 square foot, next to the Stack & Store in Patterson on Route 22. McGrath Realty is working with a client for a property. It's off of Ballyhack Road, which is on the easterly side of Patterson, just north of the southeast line. And Brian has someone who wants to build a data center, like 10,500 square feet with 36 employees. My concern with that is data centers require a lot of electricity. I mean, literally gigawatts. I think the Hoover Dam can produce like 2 gigawatts, so there are some data centers that require 6 or 3 Hoover Dams. So Brian's like, you know, I think my observation is most realtors are very optimistic. Brian's like, no problem, you know, we got the supply covered by somebody from out in, I've been there, out by Salt Lake City, some in Utah, and I'm like, well, Brian, that's great, but what about the delivery system? So that parcel of property would be served off the Haviland Hollow substation, which is just north abutting Carriage House. It's not a bad substation, but that's a lot of electricity. So we'll see what happens with that. Interestingly, this property was once the Educational Alliance summer camp, and then it became the United Jewish Federation summer camp, and then it was purchased by Camp RE LLC in 2005, which I think stands RE. I got it. It's real estate, right? And a woman moved up there, and she kept all the natural beauty. There's a lake there. Remarkably, there's also a wastewater treatment plant on that property. Like, why and who knew? So I think that property has a whole lot of potential. I think it's like 3 or 4 abutting parcels. Town of Phillipstown, I'm sure you all read that the Shakespeare, Hudson Valley Shakespeare, they lost the the funds that had been approved for them from the National Endowment for the Arts. So that's a big hit. They had already downsized their project. I really liked the new project because it had dorms for like the performing artists and stuff. I thought it was great. So they're too despondent to call right now, but I know they're reaching out for donations because it's really a big hit, you know. In fact, I bought tickets to Comedy of Errors, and the media pops up, we need your donations. It's like you can't close it out until you donate money. So, you know, it smells of desperation, and I hope it doesn't, you know, tank that project. So, Kingdom Fair in Putt Valley is the Megaras. They had originally rented the town of Putt Valley's camp, but they had to bus people in because there wasn't parking. They're back, they want to stay in Putt Valley, which is great. So they locked in Camp Comby, which is 684, the YMCA on Peekskill Hollow Road. At the last moment, probably like 4 weeks ago, I got a phone call from Chris Francia, who's the principal. Apparently, one of the neighbors of Camp Comby complained, and I guess went to the planning board, and they put the kibosh on it. Yeah, so just like that, and they were like destroyed, because it's like, you know, we're ruined. We have all these things scheduled, and, you know, people, the actors, the performers, it was a mess. However, they did land at Camp Hurlick in Patterson, so at least they're still in Putnam County, so I think that's a very positive thing. Cold Spring, Fjord Trail, still highly controversial. We talked about that, I'm on the wrong page. Cimarron Ranch in Putnam Valley, which has always had issues with brownfields, that has been sold to the Hudson Highlands Land Trust. So I think that's like a really positive thing. 22 Living Springs property, which is where the Megaras wanted to buy, that still needs a lot of brownfield remediation, and that's several parcels of land situated along Taconic State Parkway, just north of Bryant Pond Road. Putt Valley also started a neighborhood business committee, which is going to review zoning and suggest zoning changes to help bring in new businesses. They're having a big grand opening or reopening of Oregon Corners to celebrate the new bridges. And that is tentatively scheduled for Memorial Day weekend, May 31st. Town of Southeast, my town. The warehouses on Pugsley Road, one is leased, the 315 square foot unit is leased to Lesser Evil. They're a popcorn healthy snack company out of like Danbury. I always used to see their trucks like in New Milford and Brookfield. I'm like, what is Lesser Evil? Well, I guess it's Lesser Evil to eat popcorn than like to sit down with a pint of Haagen-Dazs. However, they just got taken over by Hershey, which I think bodes well. So as of 2 days ago, I reached out to the principals of Lincoln Equities, Lincoln Logistics, about the other warehousing, what's going on with that 615,000 square foot, and no one has responded, which makes me think optimistically maybe something is going on, particularly with this merger from Hershey. So fingers crossed. Ace Indico, their newest expansion, which IDA helped out with lot, that's under construction now. It's about another 100,000 square feet. The farm at Brewster Yards, which was formerly Pro Swing, it was like a mini Cooperstown, also on Pugsley Road, which would have been great, like just really wholesome family activities. Lots of families coming in for the weekends, so good for tourism, good for hotels, you know, good for mom runs and goes shopping at Marshall's, the family has to eat out. Very, very favorable things. They downsized maybe 6 months ago, maybe a little longer now. And now they're pulling out because they can't get the funding they need. So that's a very negative thing. Arbor Creek Farm is under construction. That is a tree and shrub farm on Route 22 and Guinea Road. So I see stuff going on there. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 more warehouses proposed in the town of Southeast, which I find alarming for a couple of reasons. You know, you reach that saturation point, and I was told by a very reliable source in Orange County, which is like warehouse, because those jobs, they're not plentiful and they don't really pay well, it's actually driving down the median income. So it's reducing Orange County's median income to like lower than that of Ulster County, so that's just not a good thing. The other concern is because there are, in my opinion, too many warehouses. They're looking for alternate uses for them. So the chairman of the EDC's board this year is Don Minicino. I've known him for years. He's really bright, and he's
From Domini from Douglas?
yeah, young Don Mini, not
Yeah,
the dad.
yeah.
So he is a principal at KW Commercial Realty, and what he's experiencing, and I hope to reach out tomorrow or Monday to Jim Burbo to try to set the meeting, because they're having a lot of trouble getting Board of Health approvals. One, apparently it's a very slow process, but all these places that were built as warehouses, in other words, stuff, not humans, if they want to repurpose them, they don't have enough septic fields, and that's a problem. Some are being repurposed as pickleball. Don actually is working with the company to repurpose the old Value Village and Town Center in the town of Southeast and make that an indoor pickleball place. I had actually proposed that about 1.5 years ago to Erstead Biddle, which owns the Carmel ShopRite Plaza as well as Putt Plaza and a whole bunch of shopping centers. Wing retired. So he sold the business to Regency Centers. They have 471 shopping centers throughout the United States. They do not own Patterson Commons. I looked that up. That's still in the Fitzgerald family's name. But there is been general panic because the Carmel Cinema has announced that they're closing, and people have started electronic petitions. And all this bad information, like I stupidly threw away part of my life on next door at Milltown Road, and just in hopes of seeing like pictures of bears and wildlife. But most of it is just like people complaining, and there was this big rant about the greed of the landlords, and I'm like, wait a minute, because the announcement was, thank you for your patronage for 15 years, we will be closing at the end of May, you submit your certificates, blah, blah, blah. So about 1.5 years ago, when it was still Erstead Biddle, I met with Joe Allegretti, who, by the way, is now working for Regency Centers. And we did a top secret walkthrough. We met at ShopRite, and it was cold, and the doors kept opening. And I said, it's a coffee shop. No, we can't go to that tent. I'm like, well, how about we go to the gym? It'll be warm. No. So we finally ended up at the laundromat. So immediately I was regretting, why didn't I bring my bedspread? 2 birds, 1 stone, get a bunch of things done all at once. And we walked through because they were smart enough to anticipate movie theaters. They're not viable anymore. And so there was no animosity, there was no, bad faith on the part of the landlord. They just said, we're not renewing the lease. The person that owns that theater is a gentleman named Gary Goldring from Sherman, Connecticut. He's quite well-to-do, and he likes to go to movies. So that's why he opened that one there, but he still owns the Bank Street Theater in New Milford, which has now become, the downtown is really, really charming. It's very walkable. You have the train station there. They have their giant green where they do outdoor concerts and stuff for Halloween. So, I can see where that would make sense. You go out to dinner, you walk across the street, go see a show. So that is still open. I field checked that recently. But the other thing was just, again, things change. I can remember when we had, 3 bowling alleys in Brewster. Now it's all pickleball. So we had actually proffered that concept, making it into a pickleball court, and I reached out to the new leasing agent to say, hey, let's talk. But then I found out, a day later, that Value Village may take that course. I did Google it, down on Hardscrabble Road, where they have that big sports complex, the ice skating ring. They did put in indoor pickleball courts. There's one in Poughkeepsie, there's one in Fishkill, and they all
Allsport.
Yeah, they all seem to be doing well, so maybe that's a trend, who knows. Let's just move it along. So other than in the town of Southeast, lots of warehouses, the New York State Police are gonna build a 6,000 square foot trooper barracks up at the Highlands by Home Depot, which is a great location, right off the highway. They can get places fast. That's been approved. Vols Cloverleaf, where I-84 and 684 meet, that has been rented to Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It's a staging area. That's open, it's fine. I try to peek over when I'm heading south on 684.
How do you like the new light they put there on Route 6?
Very confusing.
Very, very frustrating.
Who did, DOT did it?
I think
had
they
to.
probably paid for it, but yeah, the
Yeah.
DOT paid, put it in there, and it's only, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's only
No.
a one-way light going east, and it just seems to turn red for no reason.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
there's
for you,
nothing
Dan.
coming- well, I know, good. But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. So Nico Seafood is supposed to go in by Restaurant Depot. They have Insight wastewater treatment, they're still in the approval process. Vanguard Investors, Terravest Corporate Park, they're in the approval process for a 2-story, 44,650 square foot office and warehouse. 20 Farrington Road and Danbury Road, 6 and 202. That's an existing building. They're proposing to raise the roof and turn it into, you guessed it, a warehouse. Salinger's Orchard has received approval for expanding the farm and agricultural storage for an addition to the store. They will be requesting approval to make it an event venue, which I think is just a great idea. Just over the border in North Salem, Harvest Moon, it's amazing what they have going on there. And if you look at Airbnbs in the area, they all advertise, oh, we're close to Harvest Moon. So I think it's a great idea, and the Salingers, I think, is this 4th generation, so it's so nice to see a family stay and prosper. So that's the other things. Bad stuff is Clock Tower Grill closed. I think, I know Rich's dad died, and I think that may have been a life decision. Uncle Chief's, I cannot find out why they're closing. That's the 122-seat jazz club. I called one of the members of the LLC that owns it to say, hey, what's going on? You don't want misinformation out there, but she hasn't gotten back to me, which tells me it's not a good sign. We talked about the Carmel Cinema. All the Rite Aids are closing. A problem in this area is there's not a lot of succession planning, so families that start businesses and have been here for generations, they work hard, they prosper, their kids go to school, and then they do things like become attorneys or doctors and things like that, and they don't want to carry on the family business. So, if you talk to small business owners, it's always encourage them, get some kind of succession plan. I mean, some families own the property, so they have equity, but if you're just a business that's leasing, it's kind of hard to determine what the value of that is. I was very sad to see Sheck Enterprises close after, 2 or 3 generations. Other stuff that I'm doing is I've been working for the last 2 months with Burke Rehab Hospital in White Plains. They are highly specialized, it's not like, oh, I had my knee replaced and now I gotta exercise. They focus on things like swallowing, speech therapy. They have 13 outpatient centers. 2 more will open this year. They want to put an outpatient center here in Putnam County, which I think would be a wonderful service to our community. So, oh my goodness, they don't use realtors because they don't have to. They're like, 5-star tenant. They'll do 5-year lease with 2 renewables. They're very smart, very aggressive. Like their team meetings are wonderful. They're like 10 minutes. Everyone gets right to the point, no nonsense. Onward to business. So I've shown them a number of locations, including the former OTB, which, there's a great location. They were gung-ho and then they ghosted us. So now I'm working with Harold Lepler. Harold has offered 4 properties. The proposed Braemore Assisted Living on Seminary Hill, Clock Tower Grill, the standalone Tompkins Bank at the Highlands, and I'm missing one, 20 Farrington Road. And, we've given them all the information, we've met with them a couple of times, we've offered, one of the people on that executive team lives in Carmel. I'm like, well, Brian, why don't you come over and, I can run you out there, you can look at these properties. My suspicion is they probably already have, and we haven't heard back from them. So I did send them the information on the Carmel Cinema. That's 11,420 square feet. Probably too big. They're looking for like 6,000 square feet. So hopefully we can get them here. I just think it would be, they do have an outpatient center in Somerstown Shopping Center, but they're absolutely adamant, no realtors, first floor. I don't want to hear about buildings with elevators. It has to be the first floor. They have to have adequate parking because people that are going there, chances are they have their handicap certificates and they're not able to run a marathon to get into the PT office. So their business model is like a quality, hands-on, 45-minute visit, and they do miraculous things.
How much square feet are they looking for?
They would like around 5, so 5 to 6,000. If anyone has any ideas, send them to me, I'll send it to them. We have 2 realtors on our board of directors now, and, you know, they've sent them stuff through me, but it's just, it has to check all the boxes. That's the impression I'm getting, so. I emailed them twice this week saying, you know, question mark, question mark, question mark, what's going on, how about this, how about that? The other interesting development is the Small Business Development Center for this area is located at St. Thomas Aquinas College in Rocklington. So you can't get there, you have to go south, cross the river, or go north. They just hired a delightful young woman from NAAPAC. Her name is Nicole Golden. She is working on her MBA, she's probably like mid-20s, and she previously worked for Monster Beverages, meaning she had to commute to Queens every day, which was just understandably unbearable. So she's now working for Lou Scarmadello, who runs the SBDC at St. Thomas Aquinas, and he wants to set up an office here in Putnam County, which again would be wonderful because it would help our small businesses, their services are free. So what we were hoping for was to put them over in the Don Smith campus because DOL's over there, SCORE's over there. SCORE and SBDC do a lot of the same things. They help you set up a business plan, they help you get finances. It would be a wonderful advantage for our small businesses. I worked through Jim Burpo, I said, we don't have a lot of room right now. So I reached out to my friend Bill Nolk and said, hey, that office room, that's pretty big, you know, you're not there all the time. So of course, Bill stepped up and we tried to work out a plan because Nicole would be there maybe 3 days a week. I mean, her requirements are small, a desk, a chair, internet. That's basically it. However, because of confidentiality, she would need a place where she can close the door and talk to a client. So Bill offered that space they would try to share with, and now Bill is not by himself. He has a part-time executive director, Paula Hernandez. He has a wonderful administrative assistant. But, you know, Bill stepped up and said, you know, we can probably work this out. However, then Nicole's boss said, no, I want you in a more like visible location. I'm thinking, Lou, bakers can't be choosers. You don't want to pay for this, you know. I think NAAPAC Chamber had offered some space above the funeral home. I'm thinking, well, you know, you're not going to get a lot of walk-ins. However, Nicole can walk to work. Yeah. So there, I have to kind of.
What about Promenade on 6th? They have a space for her?
I don't know, but I doubt they have a space that's free, right? That's business.
It's all the businesses they have, but they're almost like, they're,
Stalls.
yeah, it's like stalls. Like, so if she's only there part-time, I'm sure she could, I don't know if they have space, but it's just an idea.
No, it's a great idea.
They're small, they're like 600 square feet or. Promenade on 6th?
Across the Park Plaza.
Yeah, they have all those small spaces that are.
Yeah, I've been there. They have the Veterans Admin upstairs. I've been there for the grand opening and stuff. That's a great idea, so.
The vault is cool. I don't know if anyone's in the vault.
Oh, of course,
That'd
they
be
really
really
involved.
Okay,
They make great
very
wine
good.
cellars at a lot of restaurants.
Kathleen, I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
People from the Carmel Theater reached out to me, and they represent that they operate in the black, and that they had a lot of business coming up in the summer, particularly with their parties, etc. So if a landlord is refusing to even negotiate,
No, the landlord would love them to stay.
that's not the information the general manager told me.
Okay, so the leasing agent, Steve,
But what was
Dyson?
specifically said is the landlord refused to entertain any negotiations. They just want them out. Meanwhile, they want to stay. So that's something I think you should definitely follow up on.
yeah, gladly. I did note on their website for the Regency Centers, you know, they have it listed coming up for 11,400. That's the only reason I have the square footage. I'm like, oh, here we go. They're looking for a tenant. So I don't know.
think there's a, we've lost the meeting of the minds because the assistant general manager I spoke to at length, she reached out to me in the office here.
Who's that?
I'd have to get you notes for her name, but they said that the landlord would not entertain the landlord would not entertain any negotiations of the lease. They want to stay. Wasn't a question of we want more and this is what we're offering. So there were no negotiations, so something's got straightened out. The second thing is regarding the data center. Isn't that a couple of quick questions to NYSEG? Do you have transmission lines available to meet what the requirements are? And does that substation have enough excess capacity? Because if not, we shouldn't even be messing with it.
Well, I have urged Brian McGrath to do exactly that. There is a transmission line on the westerly side of Route 22. It goes from Croton Falls to Pauling. Can they tap into that? I don't know. Again, it's not a bad substation, but, databases take a whole lot of power. So, and, because, again, Brian was like, oh, we got the supply. I'm like, yeah, but there's the delivery aspect you got to look at. And that industry does not move quickly. So, I kept telling him, call NYSEG, I've got to get them on board, so.
Yeah, could you reach out to the theater and find out what the conflict with that is? And get back to us with that.
I can reach out to them again if you would like.
Because one's saying one thing, the other one's saying something else. There's an issue there, so.
Well, maybe what I can do, Bill, is reach out to Joe Allegretti, who I met with a year and a half ago. I have his contact information. He's the boss of the leasing agent who works out of Greenwich, Connecticut, and maybe he and I can have a dialogue and try to get to the bottom of it. It doesn't seem to be an industry that's doing well, because, I like going to the movies, but I also like, being at home and streaming and.
Yeah, but none of that matters if they're paying their bills and they have a lease. That business is, if there's a downturn nationwide, fine, but if this theater is claiming, and like I said, these were claims, I've not seen any numbers, that they're doing fine and actually entering a very busy season for them, and they want to stay, something's amiss.
Except that they anticipated their departure 2 years ago, and we're looking like, what are we gonna do when these guys go? They pay their bills, they're good tenants, so I don't know. I'll reach out to Joe and I can circle
Just
back
find out
with
the
you.
real story, and that's all. So that's it.
Yeah, a couple of things. Thank you, first of all, for coming. You're certainly very busy. You got a lot on your plate, so thank you for all that you do. You're certainly
Thank you.
above and beyond. A couple of things, a lot of things excited me about your report, but a couple in particular. The data center, assuming the power issue gets resolved, they're very low job creators, but the ratables are through the roof with the kind of, the tax ratables would probably, I would think, be through the roof because of the type of equipment they have to have on site. Rockland County is booming with data centers because of, they have the power, they're right at the tri-state area and everything. But although it's not a job creator, it's not meant to be. Data centers are generally, you store your mainframes there and people from across the country use it. But it's a great thing for, I'm not an assessor, but from what I've heard, it's a great thing for ratables. So, if we're looking to expand the pie of our economic, ability for property taxes, that's a great thing. So
It's the infrastructure.
it's the infrastructure, yeah, it's pretty expensive. Salinger's Orchard with their event space, a lot of us are excited about that
Yeah.
in District 7 and in Southeast. You talk about a multi-generational family that has been here for almost 100 years. There's not one sports event or not one community event in the town of Southeast that you don't see the Salingers connected to in some way or other through sponsorships or things like that. It's just really heartening to see, local families staying in the district. And this is one of the next generations that do want to stick around, that aren't becoming the going off and doing somewhere else. So that's very exciting for us in Southeast. And the other one, the tree farm in 22 you mentioned, in the beginning, and again, a lot of these are town issues, we don't get involved with the planning, but in some of the comments on that in the beginning, oh my gosh, what are they gonna have, a commercial nursery there, and it's right next between two condos. My condo, I live in Reed Farm, my condo living room looks over that site.
Oh, good, you can keep an eye on things.
Well, I don't feel the need to. They've already planted trees. They've pretty much, from what I can tell, finished the construction part. And just from what I can tell, not being an arborist, but it's going to be a tree farm. It's going to be quiet. It's going to be, it's bucolic. I'm seeing all these trees and shrubs and everything. And I think a lot of them, not only, I was never really concerned, but a lot of my neighbors were. And I think a lot of what they've seen in the last few weeks and months have kind of calmed them down, because it's exactly as they portrayed it in the planning board process, that it's a tree farm, it's not going to be an active, nursery. And even if it was, it's not belching, fumes or anything. So All good stuff is my point, and again, just thank you for everything you're doing for Putnam County, keeping us.
You're very welcome, my pleasure.
Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, one question here. You mentioned that a land trust acquired land in Putnam Valley.
Correct.
Does that now come off the tax rolls?
I would imagine it would if it's a land trust.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the quarterly report, it's great. And I would just like to request that we do receive that every quarterly. If you could send it, it would be fantastic.
So now that I finally have a replacement admin, like who's young, he's from Mayapack, and he's like just full of great ideas. It's really a pleasure to work with this person. And, you know, he's been helping me with this, and he and I would just kind of scratch our heads, and like, you know, we gather all this information, why aren't we sharing it? Because actually today, Bill, the IDA Tourism and EDC hosted a film Putnam working lunch because we want to put some energy back into that. And one of the stumbling blocks is when location scouts come. We actually had a location scout, Jonathan Knapp, who originally is from Carmel, and he's worked all over the country. They're like actors. They don't work for a specific company. They go where the work is. They'll have two things going on at once. He has an extensive library, and he loves being back here in Putnam County because there are so many gorgeous sites. But you know, the problem is he's like the first line of defense. So sometimes he doesn't even have a script. He'll just have like a concept. This is what I'm looking for. So he's got to go out there, beat the bushes, take pictures, approach the property owner. It's all about speed. And if nobody gets back to him within like 24 hours, it's like they move on, you know, next location. And usually it's not one guy, they'll have like 3 or 4 location scouts working on like one show. I learned today, you don't call them movies or films, you call them shows in this industry. Okay, fine. Guy was fascinating. I have the attention span of a gnat, and I took like, I think 3 pages of notes. It was just like, wow. So we wanted to get all the village and town clerks together because they're really a key role. You know, we need to funnel that through them. What we need is a fast, easy process. Ideally, in my mind, if the process was consistent in all the towns and villages and the fees were consistent. Jackie Anabi was there because she does a great job in Putt Valley with filmmaking. It's been a wonderful source of revenue for them. They did Life and Beth, Companion, Homeland. They just released the reboot of, I think in 1998, 4 Seasons, which originally starred Alan Alda and Carol Burnett. And yeah, and so I think the fall segment was shot at the Perkins House at Glenwood, and apparently they made about $175,000 last year at Glenwood Farm, which is great money for, you know, people that do great works, because Ashley Ferguson, who is the social event director, all the location scouts like know her, and what Jonathan Knapp, the location scout, was saying, we like to work with people that are nice, you know, that get stuff done, that they, you know, they bend over backwards, they're accommodating. You know, if you have to text them at 9 o'clock at night, it's not a crisis. I mean, it all just made a lot of sense. And, you know, because of our proximity to Columbus Circle, you know, we're outside the 30-mile zone, but we're still pretty close. And if you want a bucolic scene, come here. You know, and the nice thing is, even if the towns don't make a lot of revenue on fees and permits, like if they can donate money to like the volunteer fire department, the VFW, all these agencies that help them, and it's a real shot in the arm for ancillary businesses, hardware stores, electricians, actors. We have a lot of performing actors here. Hairdressers, costume design, catering, hotels. I mean, they come and spend money like crazy. When they filmed A Quiet Place in Pauling several years ago, the scout locator, the location scout identified Carol Paterno's horse barn up off of Westover Road, and it happened to be empty, so the cast and crew leased the barns, and they planned to stay for 2 weeks. They were there for 6 months, and it was like $2,000 a day. Everyone, they shipped them to Poughkeepsie to sleep. You know, it was fun having celebrities in the midst, but I mean, the restaurants benefited, the caterers benefited. it's a lot of money, and then they complete their film, they go home, and they don't interrupt, our cherished way of life. So it's a real win-win. It's a great industry for our county.
I'm sorry, I just had
That's
one
great.
more question on that. You said Nico, yeah, but this is part of mine.
No,
Or
just
did
he
you-
was
okay,
pulling
yeah.
on me,
Oh, okay.
Erin's next.
You said Nico Seafood is coming to Restaurant Depot?
It's gonna be near Restaurant Depot.
Oh.
It's 3601 Danbury Road.
Is that
Um,
like outlet seafood? Because I know they do have seafood at the Restaurant Depot. I was just wondering if that's in competition with them or? part
I
of-
don't know, but I'm
Okay.
told, I've never heard of them, but I'm told it's huge. It's 7,360 square feet. Yeah, that's a lot of fish.
That's a lot
Those
of
aren't
food.
minnows, those are big
Distributors
fish.
or,
Distributor,
yeah, to restaurants.
But I
and
think
stuff.
they're open to the public.
Oh,
Unless they're in Montgomery?
Erin had her hand up like way before me.
Okay, I hope so.
Thank you. I have a question, all those are fantastic. I have a question though. When they started in East Fishkill, I remember with redoing iPark.
Yes, that was a Joe Cotter project.
Right, so do you remember all of the traffic issues that they had and all the infrastructure worries they had? And they started putting in the roundabouts all over God's creation. Are we looking at something like that to keep the trucks kind of on a straight and narrow back and forth from these distribution centers from one to another rather than hitting on our already horrendous roads?
Not to my knowledge, but that would be state highway, so that would be DOT.
Right, I just didn't know if there was anything factioned in with these huge,
Well, the only thing that's very interesting is on that road, if you're heading in an easterly direction, there are two road cuts, gravel road cuts, one on either side of 121. So I'm trying to find out what those are. Because they're not on any like planning board things. By the way, Town of Southeast, if you go on their website, their planning board reports, 'cause that's where all the action is, they do an amazing job. I don't even have to call them. So it's just like, there's all the information. One of those looks like a staging area, because when I slow down and peek in, it's all like trucks and stuff, so maybe there is a DOT plan. The concern I would have with that is, on one side, you have I-84, and if you look at the topography, it's pure ledge. Somebody had to do a whole lot of blasting. On the other side, you have the railroad, not easy to work with, and then you have a reservoir. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. So I don't know. I can sniff around and see what I can find out.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about when we have, a certain amount of trucks going in and out, like Ace Indico created their own kind of,
Ace Indigo did a brilliant job. I
they
mean,
did,
went
and
to-
they saved our roads by doing that, so that's,
They also went like to the school districts to see,
Yep.
what the traffic patterns were for the buses, those guys, when I had to work storms, I knew that the drive-through of Dunkin' Donuts opened at 4 a.m. So if you work all night long, you need a cup of joe, and there's all these Ace Indigo trucks up there at 4 o'clock in the morning. They did a brilliant job. I think
That's
the
awesome.
real issue with that corridor is I-84 is a disaster now. To my knowledge, there's no plan to add another, lane. So that always bottlenecks right there, and everybody just gets off and they bail, they go on Cobb Road, which now they can't do anymore, that's a favorable thing. But they were cutting through, going up Cobb Road, coming over through Friendly Road, they always get off at Route 6, and that's like my roots, so it's like.
I just worry a little bit about, what little that we have left on with our roads, it's very expensive, and those trucks on them, it's rough.
They're noisy too, and
Yeah, I certainly, we need all the infrastructure we can get to help, offset different things, but just questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
That's it, Montgomery?
Speaking of infrastructure, you cover a lot of territory, and you have to be alert and aware of like all these different projects.
I'm just nosy.
It's amazing.
I'm ideally suited for this job.
I just wanted to comment, yes, it's so unfortunate that Shakespeare lost the NEA money. Putnam County thankfully facilitated a pass-through grant from the federal government, and I'm not sure if that money came through, but we passed that resolution, and it is happening. They are building the housing. Putnam County had a lot to do with the permitting, and it was difficult to get those permits, and they had the contractor waiting, and I was calling the health department. And,
Yeah, I ran into you there.
Yeah, probably. it's a project, it's got all its approvals, it's happening, and hopefully the funding will continue to happen.
It's gotta be devastating to have this money approved and earmarked and suddenly
Yeah.
it's gone.
And then the other huge infrastructure project, which does get a lot of public interest, it's a huge amount of public interest, is the Fjord Trail. And they did complete their 90-day public comment period from December 4th through March 4th. And it's, at that tail end of the process. It's been a very, very long process, and now it's before the lead agency, which is the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and they'll review all of those comments, hundreds and hundreds of comments, public comment, audio comments, and written comments. And that'll all be incorporated into what's coming out will be the final generic impact statement, and then the findings. So, everybody's anxiously waiting for that, and hopefully we'll have a project that will be in the best interest of the public. Not everybody's going to agree. I'd love to help facilitate a meeting with you over there so you're
Sure.
more aware of what's happening.
Yeah, I would love to know more. I mean, one of the concerns I have over there is, I'm worried somebody's gonna get run over, like on Route 9.
Well, that's why the
It's-
project
oh my
started,
God.
and that's why the infrastructure. So with
Yeah.
that, what's happening right now, you see the breakneck connector and bridge work has already begun, and everybody wants to know, well, why has this already begun? The Fjord Trail doesn't have their approvals yet. That was a separate approval process through a separate seeker process, because it had its own independent utility from the rest of the project. So that's happening now. The one lane through the tunnel is there. Breakneck is closed for 2 years, and that's a really rough thing for people to consider, that beloved mountain. It also, helps the mountain restore itself from getting trampled for so long. So we're all, waiting for the findings. But like you said, you're afraid somebody is going to get run over. That's really how the whole project started 17 years ago, was the public outcry for you guys have to do something about this corridor.
They do,
And-
especially with day trippers coming out.
Yeah, so we'll, it's interesting to follow. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of really good information out there. It's in the state's hands right now. It's a great, project for the state. I'm glad that they're the lead agency because they have the resources to dig through all of that and to address all the public comments, because that's really important. But this is the great example of a private-public project.
And actually, that's the agency that Town of Southeast Cultural Arts got their big grant from, which, it's a matching grant. We're broke, so we can't do anything about it. But it was the Environmental Protection Agency under Parks, Recs, and Historic Preservation. I worked with Elena Truscott on that. She did all the heavy lifting, and I sat there, and yeah, we're redundant, succinct, you already said. But we submitted that, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, didn't get any money. So I said to Elena, why don't we do our due diligence? Why don't we meet with the lady from, Albany that's judging things and find out what did we do right, what did we do wrong, what can we do better? So we did meet with her virtually, and she says, oh no, it was a wonderful application, everything is perfect. I'm like, well then,
Why did you get it?
where's the money? And she said, well, we're Parks and Rec, so we give money to Parks and Recreation, and this is Historic Preservation. So we rebooted it the next year, nothing. Rebooted it, I think, the 3rd or the 4th year. I mean, by then I had already given up, like, we're not getting the money, let's just, move on. And we never got notified. We read in the newspaper we got the grant. So I guess it's like the Miss America pageant, like, if the other 49 contestants and, whatever. I mean, it's just like the weirdest thing. It was exactly the same grant, and maybe the competition was less worthy, and we got the money. Again, we're sitting there because we don't have money to match it. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty. Because I think that building, which belongs to the Town of Southeast, was in contract with the developer, so now everything's just, on hold,
So the generic impact statement will explore all of the impacts, and we'll dig in and determine what types of mitigation is necessary. and we'll give it a positive or a negative declaration. And it'll probably be out late fall. It's
Any
a
other
big
questions?
deal. We have, the county planning's been over there, the county executive that obviously has made his comments, but I'm trying to make sure that everybody's informed who needs to be in Putnam County.
Any other questions from legislators? Any questions from the audience?
Bright Harris, Carmel Hamlet. Hi. Thank you. I mean, such a great, robust report. Never heard anything like that as a resident before, so it's good to know
Well,
that
thank you.
information.
And thanks for the ride up in the elevator. He let me drive.
I did. You thank my mom for that. That's the chivalry she instilled in me. But I did want to echo Legislator Ellner's concerns, and I thank him for bringing that up about Carmel Cinema. Obviously, there's a lot of nostalgia for that place here in the Hamlet. Went on one of my first dates with my wife there. My kids saw their first movies there. But as you pointed out, businesses come and go, and that happens. I think the challenge that the residents of the Hamlet have is what happens next. Regency Centers owns 2 of the 3 major economic centers here in the Hamlet, and what we've seen as residents is a lot of prolonged vacancies. And with Regency Centers as a real estate investment trust, unfortunately, sometimes vacancies tend to be a part of their business model for a lot of different reasons. So I don't know if you have these answers or you can find these answers. I certainly don't want to lay this at your feet and add more to your already incredible workload, but something that residents would love to know about is this something we can expect with the cinema moving out? You said they're looking for a tenant. Is this going to be another 3, 4, 5 year vacancy for a hamlet and for a town that doesn't have a lot going on for our families here? And when we do lose a local business, we tend to get a more national, big kind of chain, that our neighbors in Mahopac or Patterson or these other places don't always have to deal with. So just something I wanted to kind of bring to your, I tried to call Regency Center several times and was not able to get through. I called their Greenwich office, and I also called Steve, the listing agent for the
Well,
plaza.
he does work, he works out of Greenwich. So
Yeah.
I had called and left him a couple of voicemails, and then I sent him an email, and he finally got back to me.
Okay.
But my email was like, look, I'm not crazy over this, I just wanted to see if there's anything I can do to help, because we had explored these options a year and a half ago. Interestingly, when the Village of Brewster revitalization was being approved, I went to a lot of the public meetings, and every person I got, oh, the Cameo Theater, it was $1. I went there with my girlfriend, I brought my
$5
kids
Tuesdays
all.
here at Carmel Cinema. That's
So
a
yeah, I
good
mean,
thing,
it's a sentimental thing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that Mr. Elmer brought this to my attention, because, we do need to get the facts out there, and it can't be just people, hypothesizing.
Projects.
Yeah, I mean, I do know that Gary Goldring he's rich, so if it's a hobby for him, and maybe he's getting older or wants to downsize, who knows? But let's try to, I'm gonna call Joe Allegretti and try to get to the facts. He's a real straight shooter, I think he'll be forthright.
I'd call both parties. I'd call the theater and the leasing agent.
And you were gonna get me the name of the
Yes.
assistant manager, right?
Well, I appreciate those efforts. To be clear, nostalgia doesn't keep businesses alive for sure. But for me, a lot of the concern, like I said, is what happens next. The residents here in the hamlet, we don't need more vacancies, and we don't need more local businesses being driven out. So any information you can dig up would be really appreciated, and just the information you've already provided today is super appreciated. So thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? From anyone? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Evans.
You're very welcome.
Can you stay after the meeting? I have a question for you, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 4. And before we do that, the IDA had an announcement. Do you want to talk about your thing you talked about before? The website?
Go on, do some bragging, Bill. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Big deal.
Well, only that it's been a long time coming, but one of the important things that an IDA gets involved in, as you're well aware, is we have to report everything. And the website is what the folks up in Albany look at most regularly. And we've had a long process over the years trying to get our records in order and getting them put in a proper order on a website so that people can really understand what we're doing. So we've worked over the last 5 months now, putting together basically a new 21st century program platform. And the good news is that Paula Hernandez is our new part-time executive director. She knows what she's doing, and it's coming to fruition, and you'll get a chance to see it Tuesday night. We'll have a show and tell there, and hopefully it'll go live before the end of the month. And one of the reasons I want to do it by the end of the month is because we need to get all our reports in, and they have to be posted on the website, and it didn't make sense to post them on the old website. We could just get lost in the confusion there. So, yes, we're looking forward to a new website that'll be, it's not going to be, razzle-dazzle. It'll be very, hopefully easy to understand, and it'll tell the story that the IDA has to tell continuously.
Thank you very much. You have a question?
Just a quick point, and I'm a broken record, Bill, but I think everybody should know that the kind of reporting the IDA has to do these days is mountains and mountains of difference from what it was even 5-10 years ago. The ABO, the Authority's Budget Office, in a good way, I'm not criticizing.
It's part of transparency.
It's part of transparency, and that's a good thing. But 30 years ago, when the IDA was first formed here in Putnam County, there was nothing near this type of reporting requirement. And my hat's off to you, not only for you and your board, what you've been able to do to date, but also certainly this website not only is going to aid in that effort, but also be a window into the benefits that an IDA can offer to the general industrial and commercial community as well, not only in Putnam County, but certainly without. So thank you for that, Bill.
And just so you know, one of the problems is, like anybody else that's ever tried to pull together reports from outside, is to get the people that need to respond to the report. So, there's a lot of follow-up phone calls, almost continuously. So, but it's part of the job.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4 is an FYI unemployment report. Most recent numbers we have is March 2025. There were 53,500 Putnam County residents who were employed. February of this year, we have 52,800 Putnam residents have been employed. So we're on a good track moving forward. And same time last year, February 2024, was 53,100 Putnam residents were employed. So things are looking good for the future. I don't know, 5 other business. Seeing as no other business, I make a motion to close the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's take a few minutes. Good evening and welcome to the May 15th meeting of the Rules Committee. I'd ask you all to please stand for the pledge. Bill, would you lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Legislator Elner.
Here.
Legislator Gouldman. Chairman Birmingham.
Here. Good evening. Item number 3, Chairman's verbal report. It'll just take, this will be a brief one. In addition to the items we have before us tonight on the agenda, I would just like to go over a couple of things that I might have planned for the future, just to keep the committee and the legislature and the public apprised of activities of the chairman. What I'd like to do is start visiting some town board meetings. In particular, I was speaking with Supervisor Williams, and he was talking to me about how their meetings with their video conferencing and how they have Zoom and things like that. I'm not suggesting we do it here, but certainly, Laura, if I could coordinate with you as representing Patterson, and also, of course, Tony has part Patterson as well.
Yep.
But maybe just get a flavor not only of that, but other towns, see what they're doing. We did pass something great last month with respect to videoing our meetings. I'm not looking to tinker with it, but just to throw some ideas out there as well. Next meeting, as you might know, we had some of our more recent rules put into abeyance until June of 2025, next month, and that's coming up. Also, one of them goes through October. What I want to explore, and this is something that Bill had talked about for the last couple of meetings, is perhaps going back to some certain portions of the 2024 manual that was adopted last year, keeping in the video conferencing that we passed just last month, which was not part of 2024, and certainly anything that we talk about today with respect to public comment, that's just on for discussion today, but if anything gets passed today or next month, that might be something that would be worth, of course, putting into a new manual, or into the current manual. So that's all I have for the chairman's verbal report. I'll move to item number 4, acceptance of minutes. Do we move that, or we just accept them?
Just accept them.
We just accept them. Okay, item 4. Items 5 and 6, I'd like to take as a group, and Mike Baczynski, our Director of Consumer Affairs and Weights and Measures, would you join us?
Hey, Mike. Hi. You have to wait 6 hours.
Yeah, this is good. We put you on, at least on this agenda first, so that's thank you for coming, Mike. Mike, we have 2 items before us tonight. 5 and 6, we'll take them one at a time.
Right.
Item number 5 is the approval, weights and measures, fee schedules of maximum fees permitted for inspection. This is talking about the Ag and Markets Law, and also changing some fees. Could you just give us a rundown of what the proposed is?
Sure.
And the reasons for it?
Last year, New York State Ag and Markets revised and adopted new regulations, and we've always followed those regulations. And in those regulations, the fee schedule when we go out and test devices. The only change in this law that affects us is scales. So previously, establishment, the first 5 scales, the fee was $20, and every scale after that was $10. Under the new regulations, all scales, regardless of how many they have, will be $20. That's basically the only change.
All right. And this is just to conform us with state law.
Through the chair. And Mike, there was actually one other thing. Through the chair, again, I have worked on this with Mike. We usually get to work together on all of the consumer affairs stuff, so it's fun time for us. At the very end, there was one other thing that was in the state law, and that was to do with electrical vehicle charging meters. So I did add that in as well, but that was not originally in our law, because these are kind of a more recent thing that have taken place.
But, and he's right, that's in there. We don't even have the equipment to test those. So,
Yeah, it's just putting in place for something for the time when we might.
correct.
Okay. And would these electric vehicle monitoring systems be, analogous to the little sticker we see on every gas pump that has your name on it, or has your department's name on it?
I would assume so,
Okay.
yes.
So it's just like metering out fuel to make sure those are accurate to
Correct.
to the point we start having these charging stations. It's gonna be
So now you gotta check voltage and amperage.
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah.
Any comments from the committee? Any comments from legislators? Aaron?
Are we, if we're gonna charge for them, or it's state law, aren't we required to have the proper tools to check the charging stations? Like the town of Carmel has them, they're all over the place, so don't we need them as a county, the tools to check them if it's state law?
That's a good question.
It just seems
You know,
appropriate.
this is a new thing. I don't know how many places in the state are actually checking these devices. I can follow up.
And a secondary question, if we're supposed to be, is there a quarterly report or an annual report? If we're not doing so, can we then get penalized if we're not doing so?
I can follow up.
I'm with Mike on that one.
Okay, it just feels like it's coming down from the state. I feel like there might be a little loophole there if we're not following something. Maybe we should have those.
And I would assume these only are the charging stations where the public is being charged, not the ones that are gratis.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, to the extent anything might be needed in the 26 budget,
Yeah,
certainly
just
that's
to
something
look
we-
at and make sure too that we're not being penalized for not doing something or held
Okay.
accountable.
Whatever you need to get it done.
Yeah, actually, the timing is good because we have a regional training next week, so I can bring that up.
Sure, well, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public on any of this, on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion this is resolution to amend the code or the system local law?
It's a resolution to adopt the New York State Ag and Markets
Okay.
regs.
Through the chair, it is a local law, but it is also changing the code.
Good, perks those both, okay, good.
But the last time this was approved by the legislature was 34 years ago. That's the last time these regs were.
Even I wasn't on the board back then.
say, right there,
Yeah, right.
I was still in grammar school. Yes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We have one other item, if you might, and again, thanks for being here tonight, I appreciate it. This other item is a resolution approval, Consumer Affairs Memorandum of Understanding with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 363. Essentially, we've got some good recitals here that talk about the IBEW and the extensive training that they have with respect to their workforce. But the resolve, or the resolution is that the county attorney is authorized to draft appropriate memorandum of understanding to provide for reciprocity of electrical licensing between the county and the IBEW, Local 363, and the county executive is authorized to execute the same, and be it resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately. Quick question, Mike, on this. Has our electrical board weighed in on this yet? And how do they feel about it?
So Local 363 approached the electrical board,
Okay.
and we had several meetings with them. And the bottom line is, the Putnam County Electrical Board confirmed that all the training and testing that Local 363 does was equivalent to what we do under our law. So for any union job that goes on the county, we felt it was appropriate to offer reciprocal agreement to those journeymen when there was a union job in the county, then they wouldn't have to go through the whole process under our law in order to work. So it is streamlining the process. And
Has our electrical board, not that we need their agreement, but have they passed a resolution or anything saying they're good with
Yes.
this? They have. Okay, good. Just put that on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, does Local 3 ever have any electricians that are also working in the county? Because where I'm going with this is I think that we should add them to it.
so the part of the agreement was anytime a union journeyman left the union, they'd have to notify us, and then they'd have to go through the normal procedure that anybody else would in the county to get a journeyman license. So this only applies to union jobs in the county.
Right, and I'm saying is that IBEW Local 3 if we have a local 3 electrician, shouldn't he be granted the same for a union job? I mean, it's possible that a local 3 person will, because they're all over Westchester in the city, they're a huge union. Should-
That's a different one than 363?
Yes.
If they want, they can come to us and we can do the same thing.
Bill, any legislators have any questions or comments? Any members of the public? No. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mike, appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Sorry for the long first one.
Okay, item number 7, discussion, amendment to the legislative manual, public comment during legislative sessions and committee meetings prior to taking a vote. We may recall that back in February, legislator Crowley Aaron went ahead and asked to have on the agenda a resolution allowing or mandating for public discussion during not only these meetings, which of course we have, but also during the full legislative meetings. That resolution was in written form, and then it was amended on the floor to include full legislative meetings, and then it was taken from the agenda at the March full meeting. And I promised that we'd have it back on again in some form. And what we have before us tonight is what I consider an amalgamation, a compromise. I might be alone in that assessment, or at least not fully in agreement with Aaron on this. But in other words, let's start out with this. I think honest and honorable people can disagree on this issue. I think it's important that we have these legislative committee meetings be a full and open dialogue. As we've seen tonight and throughout all of our legislative committee meetings that I've been a part of going back to 2004, the legislative committee process is where a lot of this gets hashed out. A lot of the items, all of the items are talked about and debated. We have a very structured way of going to the committee for comment and discussion, then to the legislature, then of course to the full public at the committee meetings. I think that's healthy, and I think it, as a legislator, helps me hear not only what my colleagues are thinking, but certainly what the public is thinking on any particular item. And I need that time between a legislative committee meeting and a full legislative meeting to not only understand and digest what not only my colleagues have presented, but also the public. And that's the real reason why we don't have any committee meetings between our audit meeting, which is the last Monday of each month, and our full meeting, which is the first Tuesday of the following month. I found that time to be very helpful, not only in digesting and pondering on what was said at committee meetings, but in recent times, since we've had the cameras, going back to the videos that we have on our website, which are posted the very next morning. So what I've tried to do in this amended resolution here, and I'll read some of it, and then certainly I'll defer to, go to the committee, and then I'll go right to Erin, because again, she did put in a lot of work on this with respect to what was put before us in February, and also a lot of what's contained here. But to the extent a lot of us have it here, whereas the Putnam County Legislature values transparency and public participation in the legislative process, whereas it is essential that the public has an opportunity to voice their opinions and concerns on issues that directly impact them, and whereas the allowance of public comment before votes are taken in committee meetings promotes an open dialogue and better informed decision-making by legislators, and whereas the Putnam County Legislature seeks to ensure that all voices are heard and that the democratic process remains inclusive and responsive to the needs of the community, and whereas in order to promote thorough formulation, review, and discussion of policies, resolutions, local laws, charter amendments, and budgetary measures, the Putnam County Legislature operates on a committee system in order to provide a forum for the cautious and purposeful analysis of such initiatives. And whereas such legislative committee meetings have provided an open forum for members of the respective legislative committees, other legislators, and the public at large to provide advice, testimony, and input. And whereas it is recognized that such deliberation through the committee process is necessary and essential for the proper enactment of resolutions, local laws, charter amendments, and budgetary measures. And whereas it is also recognized that occasionally, due to the urgent nature of certain legislative items and in limited circumstances, it is necessary for the county legislature to consider time-sensitive resolutions that have not been reviewed by the appropriate committee. And whereas that in such limited circumstances, it's important for the deliberative process to receive public input during the full legislative committee meetings prior to taking a vote for the approval or disapproval of such specific item of urgency. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Putnam County Legislature hereby directs that the legislative manual be amended by adding the following rule. Rule XX, it will be numbered once it's passed. Public comment during legislative meetings and committee meetings prior to taking a vote. And it's a 4-paragraph provision. A says that all legislative committee meetings shall include a designated period for public comment prior to any votes being taken on agenda items. This public comment period shall be structured in a manner that is consistent, fair, and efficient, with a time limit for individual comments to ensure that all individuals wishing to speak are given the opportunity to do so. B, if a draft resolution has not gone through the committee process but is being requested to be considered at a full legislative committee meeting, either pursuant to a pre-filed resolution pursuant to Rule 5A9 or as new business under Rule 5A10, and following a procedural vote as to whether such a resolution should be placed before the legislature for consideration, there shall be a designated period for public comment on the substance of such resolution prior to any vote on such resolution being taken. Again, the public comment period shall be structured in such a manner that is consistent, fair, and efficient, with a time limit for individual comments to ensure that all individuals wishing to speak are given an opportunity to do so. C, to the extent possible, the chair of each meeting shall notify the public in advance of the meeting agenda and the designated time period for public comment, providing reasonable access for the public to attend and participate at such meeting. And finally, D, that any member of the public who wishes to speak during the recognition of the public on agenda items shall be given a fair opportunity to present their views consistent with the rules of order and procedure of the county legislature, and be it resolved that this resolution take effect immediately. I'm going to stop in a moment, but I just want to break down each of those 4 items. Item A talks about what we're doing here tonight, what we have been doing, our legislative committee meetings, where there's an open forum. We have kind of a structured process. The committee talks first, then the legislators, then the public. That's all, I think, been working very well for the last 30 years, and I agree with Aaron. If it's been working great, let's codify it. Let's put it in the rules. So that's what A does. What B does speaks specifically to our full legislative meetings. And what this does, right now there are only 2 ways to get something on the full legislative committee meetings which haven't gone through a committee meeting. And that's either through Rule A9, which are pre-filed resolutions. Nancy, you've had a few this year, some of which have passed, the one in particular with respect to the first responders. That was a pre-filed resolution which was not gone through committee. I don't believe we had public comment on that at the full. We probably should have, and this will guarantee that for something like that going forward it would. So that's 5A9 for a pre-filed resolution from a legislator that hasn't gone through committee. Rule 5A10 is for something what we call additional business or other business. That's sometimes where something comes the day of the meeting or a couple days before. We kind of lock down our full legislative meetings. What is it, that 5 days before?
5 days.
5 days before the full meeting, we lock down our agenda so that it can get put on the website and everybody can see what's going to be entertained. But sometimes there are instances where, whether it's an administrative item that, hey, we've got a grant opportunity that's going to pass us by if we wait till the next meeting and it hasn't made it. So 5A10 is the other opportunity where something gets on the full agenda without going through legislative committees. So in both of those cases, and only under those circumstances, if those items get onto the full agenda, there would need to be, under this proposed rule, an opportunity for public hearing. I would imagine in the same way that we do it here, except in this case it would just be all the legislators at first, and then we would open it up to the public. Again, that helps me make my decision anyway. I'm sure it does for a lot of my colleagues as well. And since I prepared this, there's one other instance where things get onto the full agenda without going through committee, and it's been the subject of quite a bit of discussion this year, and that's our reorganization meeting. That happens at the first legislative meeting that we have, so there, by operation of circumstance, there is no opportunity to have a committee meeting prior to us organizing. And except for the legislative manual, which is, I would say, substantive with respect to our rules of procedure, all of the other items in our reorg meeting are pretty much appointments to the Fish and Wildlife Board, appointments to the plumbing, to the Cornell Cooperative Extension Board, things like that. They're pretty much things that generally aren't subject to public comment anyway. With respect to the legislative manual, which again, admittedly has been a bit of controversy this year, mostly I'm the one to blame for that. I'll take blame for that. What I might suggest to remedy that situation, because I do think it's important, is perhaps maybe we shouldn't have our legislative manual be considered until the February meeting, so that at the Rules Committee meeting, in other words, our first meeting would be run on automatically the prior year's legislative manual, so that there are no surprises. And again, I'm going to plead guilty to a little bit of that. But that we could have the opportunity to run our legislative manual through a committee process, which would allow us to discuss it and debate it. And Nancy and Bill and others have asked for that at the first meeting, and I'll admit to being stubborn. I didn't listen, but now I'm seeing the value of that. That's not in here yet, but that's something we can discuss. But I think that might be the way to remedy. The only other example where I think things get on the full that are of a substantive nature that haven't gone through a committee. So I've talked long enough. What I'd like to do is open it up to the committee first, and then go to Aaron, and then to any of my other colleagues, and then of course to the public. Bill or Greg, do you have anything? Bill?
Thank you, Chairman.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You can go first.
No, go ahead.
Committee process is really the best way to deal with questions and really to go through everything. That's what this whole structure is all about. But apparently this year, we have had multiple times where things have not gone through the committee. They've gone straight through to special, full, regular full, or whatever. And the comments really could not be generated by the audience. Or have people come in to discuss this. And it's really not a good thing. I'm glad you mentioned, Chairman, that you need time to take in and think, do things, and make a decision. When things pop up quick like this, none of us have time to think through this and make a logical decision. So I would encourage everyone here to not do what we've been doing the last few months. Have something up for discussion like we're doing right now, not for discussion and a vote, because the reality is we need to discuss this and need to put things through properly. I think it's a good idea to do February instead of January. What we're discussing right here, we've been doing since January, since this is May, it's been 5 months. It's not over yet. I could see this thing going right to December of next year, and then we're starting it again next year. So February is probably a good idea to do that. We do need to have public comments for items that come up. At the last special, I want to thank the chairwoman for allowing us to have conversations during that, because the chairwoman could have said no conversation, and that would have been that. But I'm finished for now.
Right.
Okay. Look, I can speak for myself. We always need public comment. We've always had it, and we always should have it, we always will have it. I'm just getting into specifics here. On B over here, and I'm trying to think about a situation. You know, it says public comment period shall be structured in a manner consistent, fair, and efficient with a time limit for individuals. Well, what happens if we have 50 individuals? Okay, are we going to give 50 individuals 10 minutes? No. Okay, so I would just like to clean that up and say with the time limit set by the chair of such meeting. Okay, and
It's in the first one.
And my suggestion for C is where it says the chair of each meeting shall notify the public in advance. Well, What does that mean? Right now, the legislative office notifies the public in advance, and we have 5 days. So either I would like to have an explanation of what the intent is for C, or keep what we have.
Yeah, I could respond to that a little bit, and I did change that. I added the word "to the extent possible." Sometimes we get things the day of. I recall, maybe not since I've been on in January, but I recall in years past, we have had, particularly with grants, we've gotten something from the county executive, Bondi, at that point, and Mary Ellen Rodell, and even Paul Eller, when he was county exec. We would get something, hey, this grant's available, we got to jump on it. And in that case, you know, to the extent possible would mean, okay, if we get it at 4:30 at night in the afternoon and our meeting's at 7, I'm trying to keep that loosey-goosey.
Right, but I'm saying the chair, that's where my thing is, okay? To the extent possible, the chair, shouldn't it be to the extent possible, the legislature at a whole, so the office would be able to instantly notify this?
Okay.
I'm just thinking,
I would
not
just
being,
think,
I would just set a time limit, a general time limit. Other towns set a general time, I'm sorry to take away from time,
Okay.
but it shouldn't be set through the chair. It should just be a general, like I had in my original proposal. So it doesn't put any one chairman,
right, but I'm
and,
just saying is
like 3 minutes for everybody to speak, or 5 minutes.
Well,
not just taking any
we were on
individual
C,
out of
but
it
we
and
were
just
C.
say, to the
5
extent possible, the agenda
yeah,
for the
I'm
meeting
saying,
shall
don't put the
notify
onus on the chair, put
Yeah,
it
that's-
on the office,
the
is what I'm
agenda
saying.
of
Or
each,
just have a standard.
the agenda for the meeting shall be made available to the public in advance of the meeting.
Okay, so you would have C read, Nancy, to the extent possible, the agenda for each meeting shall notify.
Shall be available to
Shall.
the public in advance.
Okay.
I mean, and that could be posting on the website, that type of
But it
thing.
isn't,
Can I
excuse me.
ask a question?
Well, first let's
Okay,
deal
go
with
ahead,
it.
go ahead.
Let Greg finish up, then I'll go to you, and then, yeah. I don't want to rush you either, I didn't mean to say finish up, but
No.
what else you got?
No, so I'm just
Okay.
saying, is the notification, you know, shall notify the public. I
All
just
right.
want to make sure
I think
everybody is
combination
happy with,
what you
on the
and Nancy were
legislative
saying.
website,
Yeah.
and a notice before the meeting begins.
But it always is there.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Well,
So in my original, in the original draft I first presented, there was a slot open to just do a general time slot that we could choose. There was no onus on anybody. It was just a certain amount of time at every single meeting where the public could speak, and that was just a standardized rule.
We're not talking about that.
We're on C.
Well, no,
No,
well,
we
no,
kind
she,
of are.
now, well, no, now,
So,
Erin's got her point she wants to make, so tell us which paragraph you're on. She wants to move from C to go.
Okay.
so you wouldn't have to have C to notify the public of how long they would have to talk if you just gave a certain period of time that people could talk at each meeting.
Yeah, I agree, but C
It's-
is almost verbatim from what you put in February.
I know it is, but I'm saying at this point, if we just put in a certain period of time, whether it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, then you don't have to have the staff do any extra work and just give 5 minutes to each person of the audience that wants to speak.
Well, C, if I could just address that, C talks about just the notify the public in advance of the meeting, agenda, of the agenda, that's, it's not
The
really.
agenda,
Doesn't make
yes,
sense
but the
either, 'cause
public-
that has to be available.
That has to be available, yeah, but everybody should be allowed to speak at every
Okay.
meeting except for the full, unless there's new.
Yes, that's
Additional.
what the
So that's
new
what I'm
B covers.
Right, so what I'm saying is that if you just put in 5 minutes, takes the onus off the chair,
A long time.
so do 3 minutes.
Leave
I
it
don't-
up to the chair. It's so easy, let the
Okay.
chair read the room at the beginning of the meeting, sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine, I was just trying to say, you
The
know,
discretion of the chair.
I feel like some chairs are gonna be more,
That's fine, that's
Okay.
If I
their,
may.
Yeah, well, let me just,
Dan will give you
Nancy.
20 minutes.
yeah, well, you know what it is, because I think both of you have a point, you know,
Kidding.
right now we have 3 members of the public and our legislative council. We could give everybody 40 minutes, I mean, to speak tonight, but if there were, yeah, exactly, yeah. If there were, you know, 100 people in a larger auditorium, we would want to cut that back. So I think to allow a little bit of flexibility, as Nancy was saying, to read the room, to read the, you know, but
It could get a little cloudy with the chair if they're thrown under the
But,
bus,
you
that's all
know,
I'm saying.
but nobody keeps us in line better than our public. If some mischief is
I'm
going
not a
on.
chair, so you
I know.
guys have at it.
I know, yeah, we can impeach, but nobody keeps us in line better than the public. If there's some mischief going on or some unfairness, I'm sure that chair would be cowed into doing the right thing.
So, I'm
yeah.
also a little taken back, just so the public could see, the original compared to the new one. There's like of and the left of mine. So we had talked about communication.
Well, that's why it's not for approval tonight.
Right, I understand. So we had talked about communication and better communication.
Yep.
And I find it a little offensive that, you know, it was taken to a whole new level of changing almost everything that was put in here.
Okay.
So I don't know why I went above and beyond to write something for you to then kind of redo the whole thing to what you wanted it to be without all of us chiming in.
That's what tonight's for.
Right, but, so tonight should have been off the first one, and then we could have gone from there. But instead, you took it upon yourself to redo the whole thing, and now we're going off of Dan's new agenda,
What I have here, and we don't.
a resolution.
What I have here is a red line against what was originally submitted.
Yep, that you did on your own.
No, the original resolution from February is yours, and there's a red line to what
What
was
we-
changed.
A little bit, and then there's also all your additions, correct?
Well, yes, but again, it's for discussion. I
But
would
that
like
brings
to,
up a
I'd like to weigh
But
in a
that's my
little bit.
point, is that we don't have communication, and that's what I
Oh, you
don't
can-
understand.
I'd like to weigh in a little bit too,
Go
so
ahead.
some of my comments might bear some discussion.
Go ahead.
I hope that's not offensive.
If I may,
Nancy.
related to that, I've
Yeah.
often thought what every other municipality does and a county does is at the top of each resolution is this is introduced by Legislator Crowley. That's how this is, and every town, county I know, if you look up any resolutions, it says introduced by Legislator Crowley and, you
We
know,
have that at our-
adopted and it.
We have that at our full meetings where it says introduced by the Rules Committee, for instance, or the.
Yeah,
you know.
that's kind of stinky.
Okay. But I
Because
mean.
I'll never get anything.
Well,
I'll never introduce any
well, hey, we
legislation,
passed
you
that,
know?
we passed that good thing about
Yeah, but
emergency
it doesn't,
service.
it's not on record that I introduced it anywhere. I
Okay,
don't-
well, we can, hey, that's maybe
Which
new
is
rule.
fine, I
No,
don't
no.
need credit, I don't care,
No, no,
I just want it to
you
happen,
have
but
a good point. You have a
it's a
good
point.
I don't disagree.